I'm Stephanie Wilson, and you're listening to Freedom Over Fascism.
You know, it's a thing that I think we have to wrap our heads around as people who care about saving democracy, that the people who care about destroying it care even more. And that is a place where we, I think, have to put our money where our passions are, put our time where our passion is. It is not enough to hope that some cavalry is going to come in. We have to be our own cavalry.
Hi, friends. As we approach the filing deadlines in a lot of states for state and local campaigns, I want to talk about just how important it is to run candidates in every district for state legislature and in as many offices as possible in local government. We've talked a lot about it here on this podcast, and it's impossible to overstate the importance of candidates contesting every state and local race. Currently, there are a lot of states where MAGA has a supermajority in the legislature, or even just a strong majority. In these captured states, Republicans gained power by winning seats in the legislature when Democrats were focused elsewhere. Then, with a majority, they redrew the districts so it became harder for Democrats to win. Then they passed legislation that made it harder to vote. The end result of this process is a system in which state legislators are much more extreme than the people in these states, and one where Republicans have created a lock on power that's tough to break. They've passed extreme, cruel, and anti-democratic legislation. And since MAGA Republicans have outsized representation and supermajorities, there's nothing that Democratic lawmakers can do about the laws that restrict the freedom of individuals. Then, since so few people pay attention to state politics, the cruel MAGA lawmakers remain largely unknown by their constituents and unaccountable for their actions. The cycle then continues as they cement their power with a gerrymandered district and voter suppression that keeps turnout low among the opposition. How do we reverse this situation in MAGA-captured or even in battleground states? It takes a long time. Pro-democracy organizations need to work together to build a strong coalition, develop a strategy for countering the extreme legislation, and communicating to the voters with a strong, consistent, powerful message. The entire state coalition of democratic power needs to make the voter the hero of the story. It helps if there's a high-functioning, coordinating organization in the middle, helping candidates, officials, and advocacy organizations with message construction and delivery. We talked a little bit about that last week with Stephanie Shriak, making the case for more progressive ownership of news and its distribution. This week, I want to focus on another extremely important element of this power-building strategy that takes many, many cycles and requires year-round work. And that's recruiting, training, and supporting candidates to run in every single race. In our first season, we talked to David Pepper, Jonathan Zucker, Jess Piper, and Kim Allen, who are all affiliated with Every State Blue, which helps support and crowdfund money for state legislative candidates. As a reminder, in episode 10, Jonathan Zucker emphasized that the goal of running in extremely red districts is to get the most votes, give the voters a choice, and turn out more progressive voters than would turn out if they didn't have someone to vote for on the ballot. This brings out more voters, which can really help the top-of-the-ticket statewide candidates with what some call reverse coattails or bottom-up approaches. But how do you find and support candidates for state and local offices? That's where Run for Something shines. I talked to Amanda LItman, the co-founder of Run for Something, about the revolutionary effectiveness of that organization. Since their founding on Trump's Inauguration Day 2017, nearly 150,000 people have said they wanted to run for office. Run for Something has helped elect more than 1,000 people across the country, and even more who have helped galvanize voters to make up the margin of victory in state-level races at the top of the ticket. Unfortunately, between the time we recorded this episode on January 24th and when we're releasing it on February 7th, Run for Something announced the layoff of 14 employees. As you'll hear Amanda discuss, 2023 was Run for Something's best year programmatically, but also was the hardest fundraising year. The services Run for Something offers, which you'll hear her describe, are invaluable for first-time candidates, and the progressive movement can't build the power we need to protect our freedoms without organizations like this helping candidates who have little experience to get on the ballot and run strong campaigns. As we know, with the dual challenges of a presidential campaign and running in battleground and red states, we can't afford to get complacent or take our foot off the gas. And I say it all the time, hope is an action verb. So I'm asking all of you and your friends in real life to keep on supporting organizations like Run for Something, encouraging people to run, running yourself, volunteering, and staying in this fight for our country, our freedoms, and our dreams. To donate to Run for Something, please go to runforsomething.net. To help support this podcast, go to www.freedomoverfascism.us. Please subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And please, if you're looking to reach an audience of activists, candidates, and officials, consider advertising here. We have 30 and 60-second spots and lots of different ways to make sure you're reaching your audience while supporting the show. Now for another one of the most interesting conversations I've had in a long time with Run for Something's co-founder, Amanda LItman. Amanda LItman, welcome to Freedom Over Fascism.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you because we talk a lot on this podcast about the importance of building progressive power, especially by contesting every race, local and state, across the country, if we want to grow the majority and recapture those states captured by MAGA. And your organization is dedicated to recruiting and supporting young progressives. So can you tell me a little bit about why you started it and how it's going and
Uh,
how well you're succeeding?
Happily. So Run for Something was born of the ashes of 2016. I worked for Hillary for 2 years before that and for a couple of campaigns before that. Spent some time after the 2016 election day hearing from friends I'd gone to college and high school and knew from other spaces who reached out to me to be like, hey, I'm thinking about running for office. What can I do? And I didn't have an answer for that because at the time, if you were young and really excited and wanted to do more than vote or volunteer, there was nowhere you could go that would answer your call, at least guaranteed to answer your call. So I reached out to a whole bunch of people, one of whom became my co-founder, Ross Morales Ricchetto. And we wrote a plan. We built a website. We launched Run for Something on Trump's inauguration day in 2017, thinking this would be really small. We thought we'd get 100 people in the first year. Like, what a cool hobby this would be. Instead, we had 1,000 people in the first week. As of today, we're up to nearly 150,000 young people who've raised their hands to say they want. So what we have done is built an organization that really does full service from recruiting people who are thinking about running for office. And we just celebrated National Run for Office Day to getting people onto the ballot through our political program, endorsing them, and then ultimately helping them win in nearly every state. We've helped elect more than 1,000 people across the country, mostly women, mostly people of color, in 49 states. So both red, blue, purple. We're just missing, I believe, South Dakota. And it's like been really remarkable to see them actually use that power to do something good.
Among the people that you have recruited and supported, have they been able to contest seats that were previously uncontested? And have they been able to win?
Yeah, I love this part about our work. Because we are doing broad candidate recruitment, because we think about it in terms of where we can field people, that running is just as valuable as winning. Obviously, only winning is winning. Like, you don't get to lead if you don't win the election. And the purpose of a campaign can help galvanize, or the enterprise of a campaign can really help galvanize a community around the issues. So, for example, in Georgia, we worked with a young woman, Rebecca Mitchell, who ran for state house in a district where Democrats had literally never contested. Never. In the 50 years the district had
Mhm.
existed, since they'd previously drawn those maps, the district had never been contested by a Democrat. She ran, she won. She was able to use that to be a voice for her community in the state legislature. We've seen this happen over and over again across the country. As it turns out, voters want to have options. And when we give them options, they often avail themselves of the one we like.
I've been working in Indiana, even though I live in Massachusetts. And one of the things that we were doing there was trying to recruit people to run in the uncontested seats, some of which were over 40 and therefore didn't qualify for your program. But one of the things that we believe, and you do too, sounds like, is that yes, you run to win, but you also run to get the most votes. And if people don't have a choice, if you're not giving them the option to vote for someone they agree with, they either don't maybe come out or maybe they vote for the other person. And those votes could help change the results at the top of the ticket, even if they don't change the race.
There's some research behind this. We did a little digging after the 2020 election because this was our theory as well. Um, and what we found in that 2020 race is that if you look at districts where we previously had not fielded a state legislative candidate and now put someone on the ballot and ran a campaign, sort of regardless of the outcome of that particular election, turnout for the top of the ticket in that area increased by anywhere from zero point 0.4 to 2.4% in that community.
Wow.
That can be the margin of victory for the top of the ticket, especially in some of these races in places like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, where the numbers are so small. We call this reverse coattails, that local candidates
Mhm,
are knocking doors and talking to voters and are really engaging their community, like campaigning, which
mhm.
sometimes the top of the ticket doesn't do in most places, can be the generators for turnout and bring up the rest of the ballot with them.
So you say that you recruit and support. What does support look like if people decide, hey, I'm in Wisconsin in a seat that has been red forever and hasn't been contested? How can you help me? What does that look like?
So it really varies depending on where you are in your journey. But if you're just thinking about running and you know what office you want to run for and you like don't really know how to get on the ballot, there's a whole bunch of different ways in which we will support you. So actually let me talk through the pipeline from beginning to end. You sign up at runforwhat.net. You say, I'm thinking about running for office. I'm looking up what offices are available to me. Here's what I care about. You'll join a conference call where we answer all the questions all first time candidates have, which is basically the same questions over and over and over again. You'll then get connected to one of our volunteers who will coach you through the process a little bit more and maybe connect you to some of our alumni who've run in your area who you can talk to. We then get start giving you lots and lots of materials. So maybe it's guides on how to file to get on the ballot in your state. Maybe it's trainings to stand up a campaign plan. Maybe it's how to get access to the voter file, how to calculate your win number, really how to do the mechanics of campaign planning. Once you have gotten to that point and you're on the ballot, we will help you through connections to mentors. We have a network of about 500 folks across the country. We'll help you for free. And then you can apply for our endorsement. We want to see your campaign plan, your budget, your win number, how you're going to get from A to Z. About half the people who apply get endorsed. And it's a really thorough process. We want to make sure you align with our values and that you're running a really strong grassroots driven campaign. Once you have been endorsed, you'll work directly with a member of our team. We have folks on our staff whose full-time job it is just to work with endorsed candidates. So whether you need help preparing for a debate, getting someone to answer your emails because the state party is like really dragging their feet, that you need some more endorsements, your staff needs more training, you don't have any staff and you're trying to figure out how to run a campaign with no staff, all of that our staff is well prepared to help you with. If you're endorsed, we'll connect you to someone we've worked with in a previous cycle who can support you as a mentor. Again, trying to build relationships between folks who are leading. Endorsed candidates are who we recommend to press, to reporters, to partners. They're who we collect and amplify on social. We plug them into events. We try to make sure we leverage our national relationships on behalf of these small races. Endorsed candidates are who we track through to election day. So those are the folks that when we talk about our winners, we're looking at our endorsed people. And anyone we've endorsed, win or lose, stays part of the Run for Something community. They're part of our alumni network. And with those folks, we're sharing regular resources that our partners are sharing, connecting them to programs for elected officials, and for those who lost, preparing for whatever the next step in their civic engagement journey is.
So that's a lot
Yeah, we're very
that you
busy.
do for candidates. And, as I talk to more and more people on the progressive side, I talk to groups who either want to do what you do or do part of what you do. How do you partner with other organizations on the progressive side to help build power and help support? basically shared candidates.
Yeah, we work with more than 500 organizations across the country. It's something we've been really intentional about since day one. We know that we don't need to recreate the wheel. There's amazing organizations, especially on within specific states and even within counties and communities that are doing this work in a really meaningful way and either don't have the resources or don't have the relationships to candidates or national orgs that we might have. So we're able to really engage with them and whatever that looks like for that organization. So for some groups, it's doing trainings for their members on how to run for office. In others, it's sending them recommendations of candidates to work with. And others still, it's highlighting their materials to the candidates we've endorsed or the folks in our pipeline. It is a really, honestly, one of my favorite parts of this work is getting to really deeply engage with people who know their communities really well and really support their candidates and just like don't even know where to find those candidates to begin with.
I think finding those candidates, I've talked to so many people across the country who know they need to contest, various seats and can't find a candidate.
Mhm.
And so giving them that support could be the difference between them not running at all and feeling the confidence to be able to do that. So obviously, we've got these battleground states, which will be the difference between who gets to be president. And we have still a little bit further up, and not state-led races, but the congressional races, which, control the balance of power in the federal government. How do you look at particularly red states, places with MAGA super majorities in their legislatures, and help them think about how to build power, not just one candidate at a time, but as a general concept?
We think about this in terms of the long term fight. One of the ways that Republicans were able to build MAGA states, to build fully red states, is by investing locally over the course of decades. They understood that you don't flip a state blue to red or red to blue overnight. You do it cycle after cycle with continued sustained investment. You flip school boards to normalize some policies and create talent. You flip county offices or city offices again to normalize policies and cultivate talent. Maybe then you flip a state legislative seat or two, and then you use that power to redraw the maps and ensure you actually don't have to be more popular. Because if you're not more, their positions are not more popular. Their people are not more popular, but they have control in order to undermine the majority viewpoint. We think about this for red states now. What can we do that we will wish we had done 10 years ago? So, in 2036, what are we going to wish we had done? Where are we going to wish we had
Mhm.
built? If a place is 70-30 Republican, Democrat right now, what can we do to get the next election cycle 68-32, sixty-five
Mhm.
thirty-five, 60-40, 55-45, and then all of a sudden we're at
Right,
a flippable place. Nowhere goes from 70-30 to 50-50 overnight, but it can go from 70-30 to 50-50 over a decade if you
right.
do it over time. So we're really proud to be working in a lot of these deep red states. We have folks in Oklahoma and Montana. Indiana has been an incredibly productive place for us. We're responsible for, I think, some of the only flips in the Indiana State Senate over the last couple of years. That is, I think, part of our long-term strategy to build sustainable power. And we have seen the impact that even one voice can have in some of these places, especially when the Republican Party it's going through its own transformative journey.
That's a
Well,
lovely way to put it.
trying to be gentle. There is, I think, real power in one or two voices who are willing to be very fierce advocates who can,
Yes.
at the very least, peel away a couple votes.
I just interviewed this week and dropped this morning an interview with Zoe
I
Zephyr
love
of
her.
Montana.
She was one of our folks.
That is great. She really wanted to talk, about more about policy, but I think she came to national attention because she was willing to be so fierce and persistent and had a moment where people started paying attention. And, I also talked to Gloria Johnson in Tennessee, who also stood up for what is right and also broke through. And I think figuring out a way, I'm getting us a little off track here, how to break through,
Yeah.
how to be fierce in the face of what feels like unending doom and is really important. Maybe, a podcast like mine or, one that you used to host and organizations like yours and all the partnerships will help people feel more secure to do that. Do you find in those kinds of states that the candidates can do a good job turning out more people, or are they flipping votes?
Look at the data on this in part because in a lot of these places there isn't strong records. Most places they like haven't done a ton of polling. Party registrations are if you hit or miss. I would say anecdotally, it is really a little bit of both. In some places, they are flipping voters who are sick of how far the right the Republican has gone and been looking for an alternative. In other places, they are bringing new people into the fold. The most generous turnout estimates are like in the 60 percentage ish. I think it's rare to have an election that is higher than 60% turnout or in the 60s. That means there's a lot of people who don't show up. And giving them
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
candidate who is exciting, who is local, who is genuine, who is, just like Representative Zephyr is fierce, has conviction, can be really motivating. So I think that it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
So for people who what is your pitch to people, particularly on the younger side? Say for Indiana, they just elected in Indianapolis city councilor Nick Roberts, who's 23,
Remember he
right?
endorsed him in his race?
He's amazing. He's my second guess. What's your pitch to people who are, in college, just getting out of college, younger than 30, on why they would take so much of their, you know, potential in a place that seems unwinnable to do something like this?
If you don't, the worst possible people will, is often the starting. Sort of like make a laugh a little. But I do think it's worth thinking like there are people dumber than you, more bananas than you, more extreme than you, more dangerous than you, who are absolutely willing to put themselves on the ballot in order to take action on those beliefs. And especially in places where it's really hard, you being willing to step up and fight is going to be so meaningful to hold that person accountable and not let them walk in so easy. And a thing that we often remind folks who tell us, like, well, I'm not a politician. I'm not a candidate. I'm like, I don't know. I'm not a city council member. I don't know how to do this. Is that politics, much like art or music or teaching, the way you become it is by doing it. No
Mhm.
one is born to be a politician. You become a politician by running for office and putting your name on the ballot and asking people if you can earn their vote. You are capable. You have the skills you need. And if you don't, we will teach you. The only requirements beyond like, yeah, there's like legal stuff, like you have the right age, right citizenship, depending where you are, right residency, depending where you are, that kind of thing. But assuming that those are in the clear, the only real requirements are that you are willing to listen, you're willing to care, you do care, and you're willing to do the work. Everything else about a campaign is mechanics. How to talk to people about the issues they care about. Like there's some structure for that. How to write a campaign plan. There are lots and lots of guides for that. How to hire staff, how to raise money, lots and lots of materials for that. I cannot teach you how to care and I cannot teach you how to listen. You got those and a little bit of a work ethic, you'll be fine.
That's a really fascinating flip on what you need to do to be able to run for office, because I think you're right. There are lots of guides. Also, talk to the head of Arena. They're doing a lot of training. Talk to Anat Shenker-Osorio. Their messaging with Research Collaborative is great. Do you provide to your candidates sort of a lens into where they could get some of these resources in the ecosystem so they're not trying to invent too much on their own?
We do where it's appropriate. We try to make sure that we're really transparent about what we can and can't provide folks. And I think we've been really strategic about where, like, for example, lots and lots of places have message training. Not all of that message training is actually intended for candidates. And I think this is something people miss is like it's meant for professional political operatives putting together TV ads, not someone going door to door to talk to their voter neighbors about property taxes, for example.
Mhm.
So when it makes sense, we can help translate some of that. The other thing that we often are really thoughtful about is where we don't see anything happening, what can we do? So worked with lots and lots because we work with primarily millennials and Gen Z who have kids or are caring for elderly parents or family members. They're caretakers in some way. So, what do you need in that specific moment in life when you are a caregiver? to support you while running for office. We've thought a lot about that. We've learned a lot about that. And some of it is structural that we can't fix, but some of it we can. So that's an example of a place where we've been trying to, because we don't see the wheel existing, creating it ourselves.
I would like to dig into more of that
Mhm.
because I saw, particularly with the younger candidates last cycle, I worked with an older candidate, but one of the people running for a neighboring district had a young child, and it was also in the middle of the pandemic. So what have you thought about it? What have you thought about it? What are the things that you can provide or the wisdom you can give young candidates who are in a caregiving situation where they feel like they just don't have the time because their life is too crazy as it is?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that structurally, a lot of these offices are meant to keep people like us out. I have a 1 year old. I feel this as like a mom of a young child. It's super hard.
Mhm,
And structurally, it's meant to keep people like us out. That is one of the reasons why government has not been responsive and not taken as much care for caregivers as it could. And so there's a reason why most members of Congress are not thinking that much about funding childcare. They don't have kids in daycare and don't understand how much it costs all of our money.
right.
So I think there's like understanding that the reason it feels hard is because it is hard. It is not a personal failing, it's a structural one. And there's a couple things that we have been able to do across the country and working with some of our partners like Vote Mama, incredible organization, to allow for people to use campaign funds for childcare. On the federal level, they've successfully gotten the FEC to approve it state by state, and often in some places, city or county by city or county. They still need to change some of these laws, but a lot of our folks have been on the front end of fighting that fight where they can. We've also seen members of the Rumsfeld community fight for things like putting changing stations in every restroom, regardless of gender, in a government building. We had a city council member in a city in Kansas who is a young dad and found that when he brought his kids to work with him, he was like, there's nowhere for me to change a diaper. Okay, we can fix that. We've really encouraged people to think about providing childcare as like part of a thing someone can do to support your campaign. Like, in fact, it's actually as valuable as knocking doors if it frees you up to knock doors. And you can bring
Mhm.
your kids with you. And it's one of the things we really loved watching our folks do is like strap the baby on and go knock a few doors. Put the baby in a wagon, put the toddler in the wagon and drag 'em around the neighborhood. People are even friendly to you when you have a little baby with you. And I do think coming back to this point about community building and understanding that it's not personal difficulty, it's a structural difficulty. We've been able to connect caregivers who've run for office before with caregivers running now so that you can learn from people who've been in your shoes.
I think that's great. I think one of the things we do in this country is that we tell people that they have to come up with individual solutions to structural
Mhm.
problems. And the fact that you are finding structural solutions or even stopgap solutions until a structural solution exists, I find really important. Another structural thing that happens in, I'm focusing on the red states, but I'm sure it happens in other states, is the state party has limited resources, reach, imagination, data. How do you complement the state party in a way that everyone feels, not everyone, but people, don't feel like you're trying to shove the state party out of the way, but also take, you know, what they can give and maximize it?
I think it really depends on what the state party's resources are. In some states, the state party is an incredible partner in this work. North Carolina is a great example. Pennsylvania has really strong options. Wisconsin obviously is an amazing state party. In other places, yeah, less so. That's not their fault. I actually think it's really important to name this. The state parties have been caught in like the doom loop of unable to win there for sometimes reasons out in their control, but often reasons out of their control. Therefore, unable to raise money, therefore, really unable to win, therefore, really unable to raise money.
Mm,
And it becomes very hard when you are in that, like the nadir of that experience. And we've also found many who are, want to do this work. I wish that every state party was so well funded that Run for Something didn't need to exist, but they are operating from place of scarcity in most places.
Right.
So they have to choose strategically where they spend their time and their money. Most of the time, it will be on the biggest top of ticket races where they can provide the most resources. That means that a lot of the folks we work with are being left hang out to dry. And a lot of the folks we work with are running for technically nonpartisan positions, which, while the right has no issue getting engaged with nonpartisan races, they love it. The left, Democrats have taken a little bit longer to come around. And we hear this from a lot of our candidates that because their race is technically nonpartisan, the party is not engaging. So, in a lot of places, we are acting as the recruiters for the state party. We're connecting people in with them. We're building relationships with their folks. And sometimes we primary incumbents. And I often like to remind people primaries are good. Primaries are how we decide what we believe. Primaries give candidates a chance to get sharper. Primaries, better refine our data. Primaries test our systems and slightly lower stakes. And if your incumbent is doing a good job, they shouldn't be nervous about a primary.
Right.
If you're nervous, we often will get calls from state party leaders who'll be like, why are you primarying this incumbent? Like, you think they're doing a good job? What's the fear? They should be fine. It's not a waste of money for
Right.
them to like talk to their voters more. And two, we get equal a number of calls who are like, oh, thank God you're primarying this person.
Right. Because the powers of incumbency are so large that
This person sucks and we can't get them out, but you're running a good primary challenge. So thank you for taking them out.
as an organization, you raise money for your organization to then support. Do you find that donors are kind of catching on to the long-term vision part, or are you still struggling? I know a lot of candidates and organizations struggle with, "Oh, well, we're gonna put our money into this candidate, and that's where we're gonna put our money into candidates," versus the people who are longer term and say, "Okay, we're gonna put our money into organizations that are building power for the long term." Do you see any conflict? Not conflict, but what's the dynamic there?
Fundraising has been harder this year than it ever has been. We really have struggled, so very candidly. It has been programmatically 2023 was Run for Something's best year yet programmatically and our hardest one compared to our fundraising projections, which will have a direct impact on our program in 2024, sadly. I think donors of all levels, grassroots, $5 donors, $5 million donors, are tired. They're dreading what 2024 is going to be, what it feels like, knowing that it is Biden versus Trump again feels bad, tapped out, want to disconnect, want to, you know, not care. Which same, I also would love to not care. Unfortunately, we don't have the privilege of not caring. Like, because who really, really cares? The people who want to destroy democracy.
That's right.
And they are going to spend billions of dollars to do it at every level.
And they've told us exactly how.
Mm-hmm. No like secrets. There's no secret plan to destroy democracy. It is right up on the
Mm.
front, like on the level, in a way that often feels unbelievable. Because it's like, how could they be so blatant about it?
Well, I think that's what has happened over the last, I say 8 years is so much has become so blatant. We are so inured to just this flagrant disregard for freedom and democracy, and we think, "Oh, well, if it's out in the open, the bad stuff happens behind closed doors, doesn't it?" Bad stuff happens out in the open, and then we get used to it.
You know, it's a thing that I think we have to like wrap our heads around as people who care about saving democracy, that the people who care about destroying it care even more and are
Mhm.
willing to spend more to do it. And that is a place where we, I think, have to put our money where our passions are, put our time where our passion is. It is not enough to like hope that some cavalry is going to come in. Like we have to be our own cavalry.
That's why I'm here.
Same.
Plus, bonus for all of you, doing stuff helps your mental health,
So much better than not doing stuff.
right? I'd be sitting crying in a corner and thinking, how am I going to survive this? How is my 16-year-old going to live in this world if I don't do what I can to make it better? And I live in a great state. It's still at risk. As we wrap this up, is there anything that you would like to tell our listeners who are activists and candidates and officials to give them the last bit of wisdom for this conversation or something that they can pick up and do right away, what would you say to them?
If you are thinking about what you can do in 2024 to save democracy, and especially if you do not live in one of the core battleground states for the Electoral College, but even if you do, the most important thing you can do is get involved locally. It can be really tempting to want to get on a bus and knock doors in Pennsylvania or Wisconsin. Like, yeah, you should do that if you want to. But if you can't, or if you don't, or even if you do, but you're like, what if I didn't? Knocking doors, making calls, giving money, engaging with your local candidates in your community where you live will have a dual benefit to it. One, it will make where you live meaningfully better. That's good. Two, the relationships you build through that process will give you the joy and the energy you need to keep doing this work for the long haul. People come for the candidates and come for the issues. They stay for the other volunteers they meet. They stay for the organizers. They stay for the community you build. And especially if you are feeling so lonely, which I know so many people are, I think the 2020 election, it's hard to think back on, but it was one of the things that made it so difficult was we couldn't really go out and knock doors. We couldn't really campaign in community with others. And we got to a little bit in 2022, but it was still complicated. This year,
Mhm.
if you can, if you are able, go out and knock doors. Do so where you live. Do so in the area where you call home. It will feel good. It will feel practical and it will make a difference.
Thank you for coming on and talking to us.
Anytime.
Thank you for listening to Freedom Over Fascism. And thank you to our editor, Benji Wilson. Please join our Patreon at patreon.com/freedomoverfascism. Subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please drop us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts. We thank you for choosing freedom over fascism.